Hello everyone, it's 𝐒𝐻𝐳𝐸𝐿, and today I listened to the Twin Peaks soundtrack album by Angelo Badalamenti. This is the OST of Twin Peaks, the classic TV show by Mark Frost and David Lynch. I saw the show myself for the first time just a few months back, and I loved it for its intensity, emotion, and surrealism. One of the reasons I was interested in the show in the first place was because its soundtrack seemed to get so much love from music fans. But I ended up enjoying the show as much for its characters and stories as I did for its music. But I was excited to finally listen to the soundtrack album in full and see how the music holds up separated from its visuals. The rest of this video will be highlights from my live stream over on Twitch, where I listened to the album in full for the first time. If you'd like to join me for more full album listening parties, you can follow me over there at twitch.tv/𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐿. So do me a favor and click the like button on this video, and let's get into the album. Track 1 on the album is Twin Peaks theme. Intro's a bit longer than on the TV show. There it is. The percussion feels a lot more prominent listening to it in headphones like this. It makes it feel more jazzy than it did coming out of my TV. This section comes quite quickly in the introduction to the TV show, but it's really built to it in this version. It feels like it has a lot more emotional impact. So the first time I heard that tune introducing the pilot episode of Twin Peaks, I didn't really know what to expect from it. I remember thinking, it sounds very pleasant and very of its time, but at the same time, there was definitely something emotional about it. And I think that was the main thing I took from it, and that was true. You know, Twin Peaks did end up being a very emotional show, but at the same time, it doesn't really reveal any of the more surreal or even intense sides of the show, of which there's plenty. But that ends up being something that is quite cool about it, I think, because it just makes the stranger and more intense sides of the show feel even more shocking and engrossing when every time you watch it, you're eased into the show with this beautiful, heartfelt composition. I always enjoyed that juxtaposition, and those juxtapositions exist all through the show. But yeah, it's a beautiful song, and I never got tired of hearing it. I will say that listening to it, you know, in my headphones with everything much clearer, I was able to appreciate the clarity of the production a lot more and the individual sounds, which are actually really beautiful. And that bodes well for the sound of the rest of the album, I hope. So let's move into track 2. I'm quite sure which one this will be as well, and it's a much moodier track. It's Laura Palmer's theme. This one came up a lot in the pilot. I loved it every time it came in. So much atmosphere. It's a really beautiful one. Might even be my favorite in the whole show. Remains to be seen if it becomes my favorite track on the album, but it may well be. Those synthesizer sounds he uses in the dark tension section sound like they're straight from a 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐿 and their Club of Gore album, which, you know, conjures that nocturnal film noir kind of mood. And it's just so effective. Again, it is quite of its time, and yet it's also of a much older time. Julia was saying in the chat that there's this video on YouTube of the composer Angelo Badalamenti talking about writing that song with David Lynch there to guide the process, talking about how in the darker section they were imagining this character, Laura Palmer, in the forest, in the darkness. And then as it moves into the next section, it's expressing the sadness and the tragedy of her character. And you really feel it, you know, you really feel it.
Climax, and I would go, and he said, oh, that's it. Oh, that's so beautiful.
And yeah, again, it's that mixture, that juxtaposition just works so well. All right, track 3 is Audrey's Dance. Wow, there's a lot of unexpected panning on this. Can just see Audrey dancing, in the diner with her eyes closed. A reprise of the melody from Laura Palmer's theme there. I really loved the production in that one. But yeah, as I said, it was a track that I adored during the show every time it popped up, and it's fantastic here as well. Something that occurred during that song that I don't remember hearing in the show was that kind of build where everything was getting louder and louder and introducing more and more horns. I really enjoyed that. That was quite different and very effective. Wow, every track so far has been a real heavy hitter of the show. Tracks that I already feel I know so well and adore. And I wonder if the whole album will be that way, or if there'll be some tracks that were a bit more in the background perhaps in the show. We'll have to find out. Track 4 is called The Nightingale. This is sung by the blonde lady in the Roadhouse bar, right? So maybe this one only popped up once or twice, Yeah, as I said, I do remember that song to an extent appearing in the show, maybe performed just once in an episode. It feels like it's written like a kind of classic rock and roll ballad or a kind of doo-wop song from the 50s or something. But it also has a lot of those same textures as a lot of the dark jazz that appears on this soundtrack, with the saxophone towards the end there especially. It's quite a simple kind of song. And for me, for that reason, I don't enjoy it quite as much as the other ones that we've heard so far. But everything about it sounds great. And the vocalist, Julie Cruz, has a great voice. A lot of mood in it that works really well for the show. So yeah, not my favorite, but still really nice and has its place. On to track 5. It's called Freshly Squeezed. Similar groove to Audrey's Dance. Yeah, I remember this one. This is just one that would appear a lot during sequences where people were doing something sneaky or unusual. Nice. So as I said, I see a lot of relationship between that song and Audrey's Dance. I think it has all the same instrumentation, almost like it's being performed by the same group. Just like that track, it has the lead instrument as what I think is a vibraphone. And again, it was panning in that way that's a little bit disorientating in a cool way. It does end up feeling a little bit like Audrey's Dance's weaker brother, just because it has the same sounds, but it doesn't have the incredible hook that Audrey's Dance has. Yeah, the composition was, a little bit less interesting on that one, but still a great mood piece. And I remember it soundtracking a lot of slightly quirkier, funnier moments in the TV show. All right, track 6 is called The Bookhouse Boys. Two rhythms at once. I remember that guitar part well. I do have a vague memory of hearing that in the show, the rhythms that don't go together. That was a particularly strange track, no? I'm not sure it entirely worked all the time, although there were certain moments that I thought were great, but some of the overlaying of different parts, the really erratic drum beat with the more calm rhythm at the same time. And then that part where Laura Palmer's theme just came over the top of it. These parts I'm not sure worked too well. Maybe they worked well as a part of the TV show, but yeah, it just came off a little strange. It reminded me of stuff like Pink Floyd's Atom Heart Mother, or what's it, All the Seats Were Occupied by Aphrodite's Child, which are 60s and 70s prog rock tunes that overlay one recording over another and just to see what happens, you know? And it generally ends up sounding rather messy, I think, that technique. But, you know, at least it didn't overstay its welcome. That's the shortest track on the album, and it had some interesting ideas in it. Okay, on to track 7. It's called Into the Night. This is another one sung by Julie Cruz. I love how these vocal pieces would easily work as instrumental pieces in the same style as the other tracks. God, I don't remember that. It was another really cool track. I like the way that that vocal track was a bit more in line with the mood of the rest of the album, although it still had some of those kind of simpler chord changes that I guess suit a vocal track more, but just don't do it for me quite as much as some of the more atmospheric pieces on the album. That being said, this one was more atmospheric than the Nightingale, and I did appreciate it for that. I even think some of the melody, like when she was singing So Dark, might have been quoting a bit of Laura Palmer's theme. The more dark and tense sections of Laura Palmer's theme might have been quoted a bit in there, and I liked that. I have to say, I don't think I remember that song from the show. Maybe it was another one that just appeared once as a performance in the Roadhouse. In any case, I did like it. And Julie Cruz, her voice sounds really nice in that context, singing those more jazzy notes, that dark jazz atmosphere that I really love. Track 8 is called Nightlife in Twin Peaks. It's almost sounding like a drone track there, like something Bass Communion would put out. Cool. So that was probably the darkest track on the album, at least so far. I like how the title Nightlife in Twin Peaks might suggest partying, but actually it was more specifically night life, like fear in the darkness kind of vibe. And yeah, I really like that. Even if it's not the most memorable track, it definitely captures a mood and works for me. As I said, I really appreciate the fact that it kind of leaned into almost full drone at some points. Quite hypnotic in that way, and I probably could have enjoyed that for several more minutes. It was kept as a short track and just a quick mood piece that was probably used in the background of some darker scenes in the TV show. Now the next track, track 9, I'm sure we all know what it's soundtracked because the title is Dance of the Dream Man. The Black Lodge. Audrey's dance reprise. Yeah, quite interesting the way that that track has a similar kind of bass line and groove to the track Freshly Squeezed, but with a much more prominent lead saxophone. Very strange, very mysterious, but very dancey and very cool. But yeah, while most of the track was taken up with the lead saxophone, I was noticing that unlike Audrey's Dance and Freshly Squeezed, it didn't have the vibraphone. So it was the same band, the same lineup of instrumentation, except the vibraphone. But then towards the end there, the vibraphone did come in and even quote Audrey's Dance, but just at a much higher tempo, which was good fun. You can't help but see those black and white zigzags of the Black Lodge while listening to it. Track 10 is Love Theme from Twin Peaks. That same dark melody from Laura Palmer's theme, but with a lot more space. How bleak that this tragic melody is the love theme. So that one did end up being a complete new version of Laura Palmer's theme. The composition was exactly the same, only the instrumentation was different. And I have to say, for me, it was just not as effective as the arrangement in Laura Palmer's theme, which makes it feel slightly redundant for me. Although I'm sure it had its place in the TV show. I don't remember it specifically. Probably it just worked in the background, you know, repeating that theme that we already know and understand. But yeah, in the context of the album, I just feel it was a kind of reprise that didn't build on the composition in any way. So that's my feeling on first listen. But that being said, it still sounded really great and it's an undeniable composition, you know, it's just so beautiful. Love those melodies. But if I had to choose between that or listening to Laura Palmer's theme, I'd choose Laura Palmer's theme every time. And that just leaves us with the last track, track 11. It's called Falling, sung by Julie Cruz. And if I'm not mistaken, this is a vocal version of the Twin Peaks theme, which I don't think appears in the show. What a mood change. Nice. So there is something kind of strange about hearing a song that you're used to hearing instrumental for a really long time suddenly have vocals on it. It's always an unusual thing when that happens. And in this case, I thought sometimes, or I would say mostly, it worked really well, but there were also moments where I felt it didn't work so well. Like I felt that the melody was not always perfect for a vocal performance. Sometimes it felt like the melody was better suited to just the synthesizer and the guitar. But there were a lot of moments, you know, even though I was feeling a bit defensive against this vocal being there on my precious Twin Peaks theme, there were plenty of moments where I did feel it was working really well, and where Julie in particular was just singing it with just the right feel, just the right kind of emotion, that it worked really nicely. I also liked the way that there was this kind of very heavy delay on her voice that meant that some of the moments where there were a lot of words and notes in a row started to sound slightly surreal, like there was this ghostly whisper version of herself hanging over every note, and I did like that very much. That being said, as I said with the previous track, with the love theme, I think if I was given the choice between listening to the instrumental Twin Peaks theme or Falling, I would probably choose the instrumental Twin Peaks theme, even though I did think Falling is really nice and it could grow on me even more. I suppose I'm just kind of left with the feeling of the album on the whole, because several of the tracks towards the end were like alternate versions of compositions we heard earlier in the album. It made the album start to feel a little redundant for me by the end. Like in the first half, it was just fresh new composition after fresh new composition, whereas in the end it was these different takes on the same composition. And sometimes those takes were really cool and interesting, but I think in every situation I did prefer the earlier version, the original version. So in that way it did make the album listening experience slightly less satisfying for me, I think, for that reason. But of course the strongest tracks are so strong and the overall atmosphere is so fantastic that I do end up feeling that it's a brilliant soundtrack, and it works reasonably well as a soundtrack album. It was great to revisit those wonderful moments from the show in my mind and get immersed in that Twin Peaks atmosphere once again. And it did feel like a really cool journey through that atmosphere of Twin Peaks once again. So let me know down in the comments your thoughts on Twin Peaks and what you think of this soundtrack album. If you missed the stream and would like to see my full reaction unedited, check out my Patreon where you can find an archive of all my full unedited reactions. Thanks very much to all my current Patreon supporters. You're really helping me to be able to keep making these videos and keep my channels going. I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for watching. Until next time, take it easy.